That's not made for ventilation. Okay. I see one of the most exciting things. The Polish steel dome from World War II. Are you happy now? In August of 1939, Hitler's west wall, facing the west, was finished, and his back was now clear for his intended move on Poland. Yet still a few obstacles were to be resolved. He had initially negotiated with the Poles for the corridor from the Reich to Danzig and East Prussia. However, now the Poles refused, believing themselves backed by the British and French promises of support. However, both of these had failed to inform the Poles that in case of a war, they expected a rapid return to trench warfare as in World War I. However, the Poles were planning their defenses around the prospect of being relieved by an actual Allied attack into Germany proper. The Germans now had a full army group north, commanded by Fedor von Bock, with the Third Army in East Prussia, this seated behind the East Prussian defenses we visited. They would eventually cross the Narew River and strike towards Warsaw and the Polish army in Modlin. The Polish defensive plan west was drafted on 4 March 1939. It set out a defensive strategy of holding, defending, and counterattacking when possible, all designed to delay a German advance for 3 months until an expected Allied relieving attack from the west. A frantic Polish bunker construction program then began along the 2,300-kilometer frontier with Germany. The Polish forces were thus already stretched thin in some places, and in places suffered from disadvantageous terrain which poorly protected supply lines or venues of retreat. The Polish armed forces were still undergoing modernization, although their bunkers were expertly designed, as you will see in a moment. As war drew closer, telegraphed 1 week early as Hitler had cancelled Operation White within a few hours prior, just a week before the actual invasion. But this was after a few German units had begun their advance and crossed the German frontier to Poland, and these were subsequently captured, so the Poles knew full well. And on August 31st, Josef Beck, the Minister of Foreign Affairs in Poland, ordered a full mobilization of Polish forces, but was pressured by the British and French to cancel. Thus, when the Germans did strike, only 2/3 of Polish, approximately 1,350,000 soldiers, had been mobilized. The German forces in East Prussia did not attack until September 7th. They struck the Polish fortifications at Novgorod and Lumsa, and initially they had quite a hard time of advancing. Despite an extreme numerical superiority, the Third Army had 42,000 men, with over 350 tanks, air support, and artillery. And the Polish forces defending the sector of Novgorod alone consisted of 715 men and a fortress company numbering under 200. The Novgorod sector was defended by the 33 Infantry 3rd Battalion, situated in trenches, behind minefields, covered by 6 howitzers and 17 bunkers of various designs, 6 being large D shelters, with several combat shelters, 1 artillery shelter for a 75mm cannon, and 2 observation shelters as well. But also they had 3 dummy shelters that was constructed. The thickness of the walls were mostly between 1.5 and 2 meters. However, to save on materials, the less exposed walls were sometimes thinner. But the walls had anti-splinter nets inside the walls. 14 steel domes were installed in these of various types, both for observation and for heavy machine guns, and the observation domes would also allow for light machine guns to be fired there. The armor of these were between 7 to 20 centimeters thick, with additional inside armor. The bunkers did not all have their ventilation equipment installed at the time. These bunkers were placed respectively at 265, 600, 800, and 1100 meters apart. They were connecting defensive fields of fire. Each bunker had a crew of between 12 to 20 men, and the area itself was saturated by field fortifications, as all of the bunkers envisioned had not been completed at the time. There are also 3 lines of defense, fighting trenches, and tank obstacles on the approaches. Right here, fighting around this bunker and this neighborhood, with soldiers sitting in these trenches, firing across the rivers. Here's infantry positions, of course guarding the bridgehead. Different bridge at the time. But this is one of the centerpieces of the Polish bunker line facing East Prussia. As it became apparent for the Polish in 1939 that there's a pretty good possibility that the Germans may attack them, they started building some very remarkable bunkers. Well constructed, well reinforced, steel domes, well armed, in order to repel a possible attack. Previously they had built bunkers facing Russia, since they had been the traditional enemy and subject of the last fight with the Poles in 1920. This is a sample of what they built. This also makes them some of the newest bunkers of the Second World War. Of course, the Germans would continue to evolve and construct bunkers throughout the war, and so would others. But before the war officially started, this was officially, actually, the newest at the time. We will just discard the fact that here they painted the doors orange. We're just going to label that as a sign that they were just trying to preserve them from being rusty. Inside they had ventilation systems, rear firing positions. They had signal posts, visual signal posts, to communicate with other bunkers. Close defenses. They had an airlock, believe it or not. Generators, telephones. They were armed with Maxim machine guns, WC-30 and 27. And here you would see the firing positions, the ventilation, and the steel dome up top. And they were very well reinforced with steel and rebar. And again here in all of them, there's a very interesting little open hatch here that I never quite understood, but to me have something to do with possible ground communication. Of course this is a steel door, but it's not bulletproof by any standards. And since there was soldiers in trenches behind them, that might be why. Like this could have been a place. I'm actually not sure yet, so I'm saying could. There's a lot to learn about this fortified line and these bunkers. There could have been a telephone here for the ground infantry to come up and communicate with the bunker without having to expose it to danger by opening it. And here, this is not a firing position. This is the visual signal. Just like you see the French bunkers, telephone communication went down. They could signal to each other here. And only bunkers way on the other side, which once again, this bridge is new, they could visually signal with each other. So they took the best of pretty much everything. And the interesting thing is here, after this had been taken, they were eventually handed over to the Russians as part of the Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact. And this became part of the Molotov line. And then, of course, in 1941, the Germans took it back. And in 1944, many of these ended up on the firing line again, and only then were some of them destroyed. This is intact, sealed off, turned into, preserved, but there's a lot of them out here that I can get into. I can't wait to show you. Infantry in the forest lines. That's what we would expect. There's 3 forward facing observation ports and 1 to the rear. I wonder if we're not looking at PAP 36. 88. I thought an 88 would do a little more. Let's see one. I think there's one head right in there. I don't think there's a periscope. There wasn't a periscope. Not actually seeing any mount for a periscope. I'm also not seeing any of the protrusions that I would normally expect to see. The area of Novgorod was defended by 36 heavy machine guns, WC-08, and 12 machine guns, WC-30, 18 machine guns of the WC-28 type. They also had 6 anti-tank rifles, 6 46mm grenade launchers, 2 81mm mortars, and 2 37mm anti-tank guns, as well as 2 artillery batteries. And here, not far from the river, and a little covered trench here, is another. There was once a steel dome on this, which unfortunately since the war have been lost. But here we can see, what did the Polish build, and so fast? And first of all, they built a lot of rebar and stone into cement. This is not unlike the Molotov bunkers, to be quite honest. A very large space in here. There's a very large space in here. Here's the dome well. Unfortunately here the dome has been removed. It's very sad. But don't hope. I'll find you a dome here of the Polish bunker fortified line facing East Prussia. And as 1939 rolled around, the Polish High Command began to suspect, bloody hell, the Germans are probably going to be coming. They need to start building. They were starting to build their bunkers in 1939 April. And we all know that the Germans came in September. So they built fast and actually very efficient. So you can see here is a close defensive point. I think it was armed with a Browning machine gun. Ventilation or bunker stove. There will be some of these that are in better shape than this one. But to give you an idea of the rebar, the reinforcement and the mesh in the walls against shrapnel. Heavy steel rebar. Really, really well built these Polish bunkers were. I'm impressed already. I can see the construction quality. That's very impressive. Unfortunately, I can't see a whole lot else. It's another close defensive. And there, I saw there's a little that's very cool, very interesting. I'm standing here contemplating life over the Narew River. I told you, I'm drawing the line. The bunker line. In fact, the Polish bunker line. A defensive forts built leading up to 1939. This is something most of you have not seen, but believe it or not, in a very short time, the Polish built some really impressive bunkers in the eventuality that the Germans were going to do what they did. In one side and another against the Russians. And I'll just give you a first glimpse of something I have not seen, which would be a Polish built World War II bunker with a steel dome. I did mention that, didn't I? This big rear facing window confuses me. I'm sure there's a plan behind it. There's a close defensive right in front of the door and the door itself. And then there's a dome up here. I don't know if that was a position that's been bricked up since. I'm a little confused. I don't know. It's a steel dome made in Poland on a Polish bunker where it's supposed to be. and it hasn't been scrapped, and I'm much happy. But somebody did shoot at it, at least a little bit. That's a nice grazing shot right there. Something a little smaller. This looks a good 30 centimeters of steel. No observation cupola in the center. Shrapnel bounced off the roof. No weatherproofing. Looked like it was sort of green, but looks like original paint. And here's a couple more grazing shots. How cool is this? Another bunker line, just for you guys. And over here is the German direction of attack, where the German spearheads was crossing the river. I think these are ventilations that's been bricked up since. And from the inside I'll see what that is an actual fake opening. It's an uncomfortable step up, which makes sense. Everybody's bunkers have a slightly different entrance. So there's a little alcove, a steel overhang, steel doors. Doesn't look like there was anything, but no, there's just something on the outside, maybe a telephone for infantry, and this is the first time I'm inside a Polish World War II bunker, and clearly you can see from all the shrapnel, this thing had a bad 1939. Definitely munitions went off in here. And here, see shrapnel on all the walls. And then there's this little alcove here. Possibly in this little alcove here, there would have been ventilation. Maybe some sort of machinery filtering clean air into the rest of the bunker. And this window, I would think this is a bit of a liability, but if something goes through there, well, you have a room. Maybe something did go through here and exploded in here. So this is the dome well. This is the steel dome. Exactly installed like I've seen in subsequent Molotov bunkers. This is the Polish steel dome from World War II. Are you happy now? I don't understand why there's a hole here. Oh wait a minute. Something was bolted to the ground here. So it's possible that there was one heavy machine gun positioned in the center that would be able to swing around to the different firing ports. Or it could have been observation, but that makes little sense. Yeah, that makes no sense. This has to have been firing ports. So 3 of them in direction the enemy. Oh, really cool. Steel, don't know why. Something exploded around here. And here is what looks like a periscope. Well, I'm saying no to that because it was simply too close to the wall. So this could have been bunker oven, bunker stove, ventilation. But look how thick the rebar is. This is really well built. This isn't just shabby. And they built these in 6 months, mind you. Oh, there's even the little metal hatch. just like the Russians, a little metal hatch. And it's still there. That is wicked that that is still here. Not only is it still here, it's working. Nobody stole it. It's also surrounded by spiders, which are currently crawling up my leg, but that's good, it's fine. Like spiders, kill mosquitoes, go forth and conquer. And what have we here? We have a fighting compartment with one defensive position and one nacelle for what was probably, I heard they were using Browning machine guns in these. And I guess munitions, spent casings went into a bucket. Here's one of these little windows. This, wow, this almost looks like a grenade chute, like the French would have. I wonder if I can find one of those intact. And here's another window. That moves as well. That'd be awesome. Another without the hatch to the facing the actual entrance. What the machinery, what the layout of these actually were, I do not yet know. This is the first time I've been inside one. But there's more Polish bunkers on this line. So now I'm going to go find them. One last look at the dome because it's so freaking awesome that it's here. Just saying that there's this dome up here that is still in place, intact. Binoculars. And of course, there is a dip of some sort right in front of the door, like seems to be standard. In every bunker, there's always a hole in front of the door, even if it had nothing to do with the trip door. Comfortable entrance? Nope. But you want to slow people down getting into your bunker, you don't want to make it that easy, so get something they have to jump up and actually make that step up right in front of the machine gun here. See if I can find out if that was a grenade chute. See if there's a diamond ditch here. So this is interesting. This is the firing in front. There's probably metal embrasure there, probably. An overhang, a camouflage maybe. And there is that tube that I thought might be a grenade chute, like the French had. There's a dip here, but I don't know if you can actually ever have called this a ditch. I'm hoping this is going to be one out of many. Somebody actually tried to patch him up. The battle damage. That's optimistic. On the 10th, General Falkenhorst from the 21st Infantry Division was to cross the river and attack Novgorod before Guderian's 10th Armored arrived. Their reconnaissance elements were arriving on the 7th. The Germans began crossing the river under heavy machine gun fire. The river at this time was relatively shallow, as it had been a dry year. It was intended by the Poles to flood these because of the low water. That was not possible. The river itself was only crossed by a wooden rail bridge and serviced by ferries. All the forest in the area we see today was absent in 1939, so the bunkers had a full field of fire and full view of the river's crossing points. The first crossing by the Germans was in rubber boats and was eliminated as they were pushed back across the river by the Poles. Later they tried again to cross over a 5-kilometer front, this time with artillery support and laying a temporary smoke screen. But the bunkers fought well and they held up, also to direct fire by artillery and AT guns. It would take the Germans over 3 days to press past this bunker line and eliminate them one by one. So the river is what, down there? The river's got to be in this direction, right? And here's the next little shelter up from the one with the dome. Doesn't look very big, I would imagine. This is a small anti-tank cannon position. Probably wasn't as dug in then as it is now. Well, this is the rear entrance. There's the river and the German attack direction coming from down there. So you get to choose. You want to see it from the front, or would you like to see it from the inside first? Well, you're not here to vote, so I'm just going to go in. So these are rear defensive firing positions that have been sealed up, which we see quite a lot because we all know that the farmer here has used this bunker for storing of something. Bloody hell. Okay. Polish friends, you did not make these very comfortable. So, this is it. There was probably a machine gun position. I gotta go to the roof to see this. This is pretty much it. A very small position with a close defensive position. That makes no sense. But that's all there is. So, observation, that'll be observation. And where's that coming from? This can't be it. There must be more because there's full of firing positions. Well, there's one. Where's that one? And where's that one? I'm confused now. This is a lot bigger than I thought. But, and what is this? Was this always sealed up, or is this just a... ...15 meters wide, but... And obviously, the Germans thought it would be worth putting a few rounds in it. But... I don't see... Alright, there's a steel dome here. So there must have been another way in. No, this is it. But what's all this other stuff then? I don't understand. There's a steel dome right here. And from the size of it, judging it was an observation dome. This looks like a fix. A bit of a fix, because if you look at the steel dome side, well, obviously there's nothing there, there's just bunker there. So there was never an entrance to this dome there. So this dome was probably built for something else, or a different elevation or height. You see there's a square, the square path I was in just down there. If that had been lower, or if the roof of the bunker had been lower, then that square would have led into this and you'd get up into the dome. But the roof was way thicker than that, so it was placed here as it was constructed. But it wasn't constructed for this design of bunker. And once again, the Polish built these in about 6 months' time, so one cannot really be surprised at some fixes, some last-minute innovations, some retrofitting. But what is all of this wall doing? There's nothing inside this. All this is just dirt. Unless it was built as a protective wall. And this was a protective wall. With a rear defense for 2 guys in this thing, 2 or 3 people would be in here. Observing. That's an interesting little build. So you see that again, the dome really doesn't fit. It's off, even off the base, and there would have probably been hatches in it from, they'll close 3 windows in this direction, I would imagine.
And after doing a little research, I cannot believe it, but this is actually one of the Decoy bunkers. The firing port, however, seems quite functional, so I wonder if a few men was not here for distraction and temporary fire. But, hey, the Decoy lives.
And here, crawling through the woods, the next bunker, I see one of the most exciting things there is to see when you deal with this. You see a bunker, and I see 2 steel domes. At this point, I'm no longer looking at what holes there's around me, because this is just awesome. Here is Polish World War II, 1939, 2 steel domes, observation and firing. Bunker. Another line. And the amazing thing is I don't see anything wrong with it. Why is there nothing wrong with it? I'm surprised there wasn't no holes in it. Aren't there supposed to be holes in these? And this was clearly involved in the fighting. And here we get to the damage. Oh yeah, this was shot at well. Well and good. There you go. As the Germans crossed the river and fought their way onto bridgehead over the bridges, as the invasion of Poland started, this was in the firing line. This is where it all began. This is where World War II changed, I guess, the history of the world. And these guys, whether they knew it or not, were making history. Well, they were certainly being shot at by history. And I'm thinking that might be a periscope. Because, well, if there was a periscope, I don't know yet if Polish bunkers had periscopes. Multiple observation ports. This is now I've seen 3 of these in my life. 3 main observation points and then 1 to the rear. Grazing shot there on the side. This is cool. I can't wait to get inside this thing. And I can, but as far as I can see, the door was open. And yeah, this definitely was shot up. We've only seen stuff like this in the Maginot Line. And here's definitely something large. I don't know if that penetrated. That could be, definitely could be an 88. It's much larger than the puck. Let's see. Oh, no, yeah, it did. This goes all the way through, inside. That was bad for whoever was inside, if that went through. And this is, I mean, look at this. This is, what is this, 40 centimeters? This is really a thick embrasure. Imagine what the kinetic energy it would take to shoot through this. They really were built well. And imagine the amount of rebar. Speaking of rebar, here's some more damage to the exterior. And you can see the stone and rebar sticking out. I sense I have an idea what direction the Germans came from. This looks a little bit like it have been exposed to a cheese grater. But it's still here. Right, let's go inside this. I guess this is one of history's lesser known bunker lines. And I'm still trying to figure out what the pieces are. There's one of these pipes that goes nowhere. One I would imagine would be ventilation. I see these. There was possibly a steel grate in front of this. And then here's one of those little windows that I see in these that I don't quite understand why you would have a little metal gate here. But here it is. And here's the entrance, which is not horribly uncomfortable, with a close protection right next to it. Alright, let's see. And of course there's a hole right in front of the door because, well, there always is. I don't know why. Alright. Let's see, firing embrasure. There's a firing bench. And I think some of these pipes were well protected. I have yet no idea what the features of these bunkers are. And here's another one. I keep thinking it's a grenade drop, just like the French had. There would literally, there's no moat, it would just look like there's a ditch, so it would just roll outside. Oh, there's even the rung ladder here. It'd be still my beating heart. I can crawl up into the bloody thing. Yes. How amazingly cool is this? And then there's this, which I don't know. Again, one of these. And one of these. This steel pipe is original. Don't know where it came from or what it was doing. Maybe there was a bunker oven that was connected to it. I don't know. It's a heavy, it's a steel cable, it's a steel pipe. Oh, and here's the observation dome, and there's a rung ladder, and I get up into it. It's the height of the spiders. How awesome is that? I keep thinking this would have had something to do with command and communication, but I don't know, to be honest. However, and here again, for this heavy pipe that's outside, I keep thinking this might be a ventilation room that will filter into the others. I'm guessing, I don't know at this point. Well, this is a mount for a generator maybe. Now, so halfway in here. Okay, this is fairly roomy. It actually smells burnt in here. That's kind of, look at this, and that is where it impacts. This is so clean in here. There's no spiders. There's no spiders. What the hell? It's neat and clean, and it's not wet. How's that even possible? Anyway, shock aside, this is where that came through. And if there's anybody alive in here when that happened, well, then they died in here. See that one on the brazier? That was hit as well. So there's actually 2 hits here that had penetrated. And I'm sitting on this steel rung here. Maybe that's why it's so clean in here. Because everything just falls to the floor. This might have been a mount for a seat. Oh, there's the manufacturer's mark. Oh, this is so cool. And this is dome number 13. 1939. Yes, we have the manufacturer's mark. That is just cool. And the build year and the number. Is there anything else you can possibly want today? And oh wow, look at that. This is the inside. So whatever came through, this is where it landed. This thing would have bounced around in here. This was literally a blender. And I hate to use the word literally, but damn. I am glad I was not in here when that happened. I hope the dude had poked his eye out or had left Wow. Seriously, wow. Okay, so I'll say this is, well, except for the beer bottles and beer cans, it's not bad. Something must have been bolted to this floor right here. That there must have been. And it had been ground out maybe some of these places. Because this is just as clean. It's funny, the rear embracer is not reinforced with a plate that's welded on the inside like these. This whole thing has an extra inner now. And here's the damn manufacturing year. 1938. Number 1070 137. 1938. Set O manufacturing. I mean, what can I possibly tell you? So, again, this was built before they decided to build the fortified line here, the bunker line. You can see that shroud on the inside. Alright, that was one of the coolest, well-preserved Polish World War II bunkers I've seen. Give me the last look here, because there's many more of them, and I think it's amazing that nothing happened to it. It wasn't blown up, it wasn't damaged after capture, not even by the Russians. Leads me to wonder, was this in a location where the Russians could have used this for their defense? A Molotov line, but they didn't dismantle it. A lot of these stones were dismantled from the Polish bunkers and put inside the Russian Molotov line bunkers. That's where they came from, that's why some of these are destroyed. But not here. Here it is. Even in the rain, it's pretty damn pretty. And there's no graffiti really. Well preserved, not destroyed. Alright, the steel door is missing, but you can't win them all. On the 10th, the Polish actually carried out a full counterattack, almost driving all the way to the river. The Germans was attacking the shelters with Pak 36 and 75mm, and it was mentioned in dispatches that anti-tank missiles were also used. Also, Heinkel 111 attacked the shelters directly. On midnight of the 10th, the Polish 42nd Infantry Regiment marched to occupy the second line of defenses at Novgorod. Fighting went on continuously throughout the following day, but slowly the Germans overcame the first line of bunkers, and also by using direct fire with artillery and flamethrowers. And later that day, the 88th also was firing directly onto the shelters. On the 10th, all shelters had been taken, and most of their crews had been captured. The Polish 42nd initiated a limited counterattack in order to prevent the town of Novgorod from being outflanked, as their forces were still fighting there, and in order to try to recapture the bunkers that might have been lost. They met fierce resistance as more German forces were now arriving over the temporary bridge. But one German plane was actually shot down by an anti-tank rifle. At dusk, the Poles had to retreat, and it was clear the Germans were now aiming to roll up the Polish Narew position, heading toward Lumsa, where a completely different kind of fortification awaited them. So in this forest, watch that huge amazing bunker, and here's the next on the line. So they're definitely mutually supporting, but one thing I've noticed, now that I think about it, is there's relatively little offensive firepower in these. There's a machine gun cupola in 3 directions, but that's about it. I would like to see a little bit of, oomph. If you look over, if you could see through this forest that's here now, you'd be able to see the other bunker about 300-400 meters that way. Fighting direction is on the other side of this bunker, and this looks like it's been shot up from behind.
Actually, it looks like it's been shot up quite a bit from behind. Which could give us the indication that German forces had rolled through this area and this was taking them under fire from behind and therefore being taken under fire itself. I think I can see, if there's a metal hatch in there, that would be amazing. Well, but this gives us a wonderful view of the construction. Large stones, heavy rebar intermittent with thinner rebar. Certainly some serious steel, especially around the door there, and doesn't look like anything would penetrate this. They are at least 1 meter plus thick. That looks like, even that's been shot up there. I don't know if that was the ventilation for an oven or there was a periscope in there. I don't yet know if the Polish had or he was using bunker periscopes. Don't see why they wouldn't, but you know, they were building these in a very short period of time, sometimes with whatever materials was available. Alright, this is not the most comfortable entrance, and of course there's a hole in front of it, which is not helping. Alright, so this is an original steel shutter. Of course it won't open. This looks like it breaks in the middle. This is an original. These would open, the machine gun will sit on there. And here is the well for the spent casings. And the triple holes for the aftertage. That was brilliant. And it certainly looks like somebody at one point tossed a grenade in here or something exploded. And here again is this. I keep wanting to make this a grenade chute. It just makes so much sense that it would, except it's just a grenade chute. The grenade was rolled out on the ground in front of the embrasure. But certainly looks like an explosion will set off in here somewhere. And there's some of the pipe coming from we're back to catastrophic events. So looking at catastrophic events, that's a catastrophic event. There's the rear defensive. Well, hatch is missing, and missing here too. And yeah, certainly this received a direct impact here. And here's another one of the original shutters. This was the offensive position. This was the firing position here and here, where these have been bent back. This could also have been scrapper or something. And these, I imagine they would push open and then there'll be a little string to pull them back. I actually think that's as simple as that was. Until I find out if anybody restored one of these, I won't actually be able to tell you. But yeah, serious explosion in here. Looks like mounts on the wall for, I would certainly hope that had been a radio, some ways of communication in here. But what we do have is another observation dome here. And there's some more stuff in this. What is that? That is, there's pipes. That's what that is. These are speaking tubes. They're speaking tubes leading down to the fighting compartments from the observation dome.
That's what they are. That's okay. Now I get it. That's really interesting. So they're typical classic embrasures, and he would have a little seat up here, have his 3 holes to look at, and speaking tubes. That's very, very cool. Now I figured it out. Because there's the one place here, which is really, really cool when things are where they're supposed to be, including the manufacturer's mark from 1936. Oh, can you bite the head of a turkey? No, I lie. It's in 1938. I just couldn't read it from down there. Sorry. Anyway, there's the manufacturer's mark right there of who built this thing. 1938, dome number 331 by Huta. We'll let a Polish person pronounce that last name there. But here, speaking tubes. Damn speaking tubes. And then there's only 2 embracers. And one of them actually have the lid in front. That's cool too. The shutter is there, it's closed. So you could only watch in 2 directions? That seems a little... You could only watch in 2 directions. That's not really very cool. Especially not if the Germans were at his rear. Then he's hoping the guy's down below. Let's see what he wants. Okay. 1938. This was actually all they did for the fighting department. They were doing different than everybody else. Everyone else had these staggered openings. They just had one small opening they could fire out of. I like that because I sometimes thought that it would just funnel in a shell or something the other way. So here, to the right is the ejection of the spent casings, and this has to be a grenade chute. Well, a hand grenade rolling down here. There was a little, this was probably a little deeper. There was a little diamond ditch. There's some indication there was. Oh, why is there, what are this? These are just stones? No, this is some, no. This was the expected fighting direction here. You can see far and wide. Here where the other bunker was. And you have this whole dirt mound covering the entire bunker. The only thing that sticks up is the observation dome that has been shot at to the point where it cracked like an egg. Holy crap. I didn't see any signs of that inside. Good. So at least I see one grazing shot, one on the embrasure, one that splattered and cracked, and then probably another one there that actually cracked it in a lot of places. They're not supposed to crack like this. I'm just saying. Hugo, whoever manufactured this might have been a little brittle. You may have heat treated this just a little too much. Even the ventilation had been shot up. I think this is ventilation, not for observation, but and here the embrasure took a few hits as well, although it held up from here quite well. We have to remember, it's a miracle that some of them are still intact, because some of them have been completely destroyed. And this is where we have to take into account that German sappers during the war, fighting them, blew up quite a few of them. This is the next one down the line, and there's nothing left of it except a crater in the ground. And right here was the river crossing, Narew River. The last bunker to fall in 1939 was this one. But it didn't look this way after the Germans had taken it. They eventually handed this area over to the Russians, who incorporated this bunker then into the Molotov line. In 1944, it was finally blown up by the Germans after they had recaptured the site in 1941. So, what do we have here besides hell of a story? We have one of the largest bunkers on the Narva, or the Polish position here on the river. This held for several days before it finally was taken by the Germans. The commander in here, he fought and died as well. After the war had ended, it was then turned over to the Russians according to the Molotov line and Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. And the Russians began to construct Molotov line bunkers behind us here in this area, which they did, quite a few of them actually. There's a whole Molotov line of fortifications further to the east of here. I know, imagine always imagine a hook for a cannon. There's a steel dome here, and this was equipped with the Maxim for the turret, and there was the Maxim WC-30 and WC-27s that was equipping these bunkers. Also in the close defensive positions, these had an air filtration system. They had their own ground well. They had telephone communication. Here is the dome well, what's left of it. It's very interesting to see how well reinforced this was. And it also had an optical communication system, a signaling system in case the telephones went down, so they could still communicate with the other bunkers. These are all positioned on a line here surrounding the bridge crossing. Well, of course, the woods were not quite like this. And before the German attack, the Polish pulled in their forces from the field into the bunkers, having been forewarned of the invasion. These were actually very impressive, and what makes them quite more impressive is the fact that they were built in sometimes less than 6 months for this line. And you will notice most of the bunkers of the Polish line here are not covered in graffiti, which is nice. They actually seem to be a little bit more valued than many others. The crew of the bunker that fought here and died here in 1939 are remembered by the locals.
It was planned that permanent fortifications were to be grouped in 4 regions along the Narew. The gaps between the individual areas of permanent fortifications were to be filled by field-type structures. However, when the war began, the planned defenses had not all been completed, leaving gaps in the defensive weak points.
And in the woods behind the bunker is the Polish trench system that ran up here along this line, guarding the bunker behind me, and along the riverbank over here. And speaking of trenches, the Polish bunkers were also gas-proof,
had a good ventilation system and an airlock system.
Further up the river was the fortified bridgehead at Lumsa, protected by 3 forts built by the Russian Tsar from 1896 to 1914. These old forts were outdated. However, they had been upgraded by the Poles with 12 reinforced concrete bunkers, trenches, barbed wires, and 9 more bunkers on the southern side of the river. The forts were manned by the 1st Battalion of the 33rd Infantry Regiment. There was also an anti-tank platoon with 37mm Bofors guns and a platoon of outdated 76mm WC-1902 guns, 2 rifle companies supported by a light howitzer detachment, and 1 heavy artillery regiment from the 18th. On September 3rd, the town was bombed by the Luftwaffe, but caused little damage to the Polish forces. On the 7th, Falkenhorst's forces reached the outskirts of Lumsa and proceeded to simply attack frontally. This failed miserably, and the Germans lost 6 tanks and a number of infantry. This was then followed by several more German attacks, but all were repelled by strong Polish counterattacks, who even took 57 German prisoners. The next day saw 4 consecutive attacks on Forts 2 and 3, which were also repelled, leaving the Germans to call on the Luftwaffe again, who then bombed the first forts, causing significant casualties. However, the next German attacks were also repelled. The Germans then split their forces, with one attempting, with artillery and airstrikes, to take Fort number 1, which we are visiting. The Polish suffered more losses here, but repelled the attack again. Not so bad for an old fortress, really. The 10th saw similar attacks and airstrikes. Not even a single bunker was lost, and the Germans were forced to retreat outside the range of Polish artillery. However, these 3 days had caused the Polish some 30% casualties and wounded, but their morale was still high. But now, with the Germans having taken Novgorod and broken through at Wisna north, the commander Stefan Kosecki ordered the fort and town abandoned, feeling he was unable to hold on much longer. With the last Polish forces crossing the river at 2200, the Germans took control of the town the next day. This decision was, however, a controversial one, as the fort had held up really well to German attacks. The town was later handed over to the Red Army on the 29th and was retaken by the Germans again in 1941. But given how well the fort looked today, it's a testament to just how well it must have been constructed and its design and layout. One can say it has been abandoned several times, but never taken, and it is an interesting place to visit. Let me show you exactly where they fought. As you can imagine, this road is original, and as you can also imagine, this enormous, huge dirt mound is not. That's part of the old fort number 1. First thing you see is this. One of the reinforcements made before the First World War, a war in which the fort was not used. This could have been a caponnier. I'm not entirely clear on what part of the fort this is. Could have been a caponnier. That's the first thing I see of this fort. Built by the Tsar to protect against East Prussia. And reinforced later, before World War I. But it really saw its battle in 1920, when the Poles were defending against the Russians here. And then, subsequently, 1939, when the Germans attacked it. Built by the Tsar. I guess he didn't build the tank obstacles. Now standing out front of it. Eventually used by the Poles to protect the river from the German army in 1939. And it looks in pretty good shape for something that fought the German army
in 1939 for 3 days. So I'm curious to see what else is here. Fighting positions, infantry firing positions up here on the flank of the main building. And I'm wondering if that tunnel is not about visual communications as well. Or, if I look a little further, I see the mounts for a generator. So this is probably the ventilation or the exhaust for the generator. Now obviously this building is a caponnier, but these pits in front of the gun loopholes, I have never seen anything like this before. We're going to see that repeated in this fortress, and I am at a loss for an explanation as to why you would sink any part of a firearm or a gun or a cannon into the ground in a pit like this. Well, if any of you have seen this before, or any idea of this, initially I thought it might have something to do with light generation. That would be a small power plant for the light under it, but there's too many of them, so it has to be a gun pit, just like the firing ports here, so the caponnier can defend the entire front side of the fortress. Steel observation dome up there, or some observation dome. Go to the roof and find out. This looks like a technical way, to be honest. Pretty classic 19th century barrack building with barrack rooms. Up on the ditches here, firing positions, open air. It's very traditional, this building. There was originally 5 of these forts, only 3 of them were modernized before the First World War. This was really the only one that really stood and fought in the Second World War, but also for the 1920 War with the Russians. This is very straightforward, very rudimentary, very clean. There's a tile floor here, you can see once. Very classic Russian construction of their hallways, in their bunkers, in their bedrooms, and the men in the dorms, in the kaserne. For kasernes that we've seen before, similar, very crude, rudimentary. The earth ditches are really impressive in these places. And here's something we see so often. Bathrooms. Nicely tiled bathrooms. They almost look like there would have been a seat here. A bowl. I mean, it almost It's giving me the impression there was a proper bathroom toilet here. But since it looked like there was a drain going in, urinal on the other side, again it looks like these grooves, there could have been a flush of sorts or water pipes. I was like, so all the bunkers I would like to see. And once again, traditionally, there's firing positions in the toilets. And this is the first caserne we see. Now, to see all the other stuff. I mean, the earthworks here are really impressive. I mean, this is some very serious earthworks, which will certainly make a difference for, you know, straight on directional fire. However, for World War II, with the lessons learned about artillery in World War I and airplanes sitting out here in the open, it just sounds like a bad idea. But it fought for a few days, and the fort wasn't taken by the German army. It surrendered. The garrison left and surrendered the fort. Very impressive ditch defense. I would initially have thought these rounds were for lighting, but these are firing positions. Well, let's go see what they may have had mounted in here if the fort had been overrun. This is a close defensive position, and another one leading the other way. And around the ditch there, heavy steel wall, heavy steel door. Nice and angled. Well, that's interesting and somewhat unexpected. I know there would sometimes be a ditch for ammunition to pick up the spent casings. This seems a little extreme for that.
It was the same. Shown.
Does it mention what kind of weaponry they had? That's interesting. Oh. Huh. I'm confused. Okay. So it must have been on a plate of some kind. Why would you put a ditch cannon, which is a fairly simple, almost no matter what it was, if it was a mitrailleuse or it was a Gatling or it was a French 5, there's no reason to put it on a plate. I've never seen why there would be a separate plate for a weapon defending a ditch. It didn't even have to be accurate. In some of the French forts they used old Napoleonic guns for ditch defenses because all they have to do is clear a ditch, basically. Well, I think maybe my suspicions that they may have had toilets. There's a growling. Hey, anybody who ever spent any time in the infantry will understand how important toilets are. I will notice one thing on this hallway. It's not as cold as underground hallways are. I don't think we're underground. I think we are walking along the ditch at ground level. Sorry, I don't know what else is delayed on that. And I'm thinking that because along the side there are these, which will have a beer can in it. I would have thought would have been for lighting, but certainly not for fire. It's not a firing position. Oh, and here you could seal in this section in case the fort was breached with steel beams in there. All right. Okay. Interesting. Okey-dokey. Well, there's a couple of floors that are coming down here. I don't know how you've gotten up to them or to them, but certainly I can see there's a floor up there. And here I can see the indent or a staircase in the wall. But I wonder if that was not removed during the upgrade. I don't actually know. I can't tell. This is very interesting. Is that a pipe? Is that a cement pipe with steel rebar leading up? I think it might be. So, okay. And there's a hole for the pipe to continue to the outdoor. This could have just been ventilation. This looks very technical around here. But the fun part of this would be this. Here's a tunnel. It's an interesting slide under the stairs. It almost looks like that's a deliberate slide, doesn't it? Well, all right. So, now we're going under the ditch. I know that because I'm psychic. I just know these things. Okay. It's a bit of a steep grade. But, well, what are you going to do? And I will notice that these floors, the floor tiles here, are actually quite rough, so you don't slip. Well, some of us don't slip. If you wear the appropriate shoes, you wouldn't slip on this kind of floor tile. Sorry, make it easy. Okay. So, I feel we have walked up to the first floor. Artillery position. And here's where the artillery came. If you had any doubt, that's not made for ventilation. So, let's take a look at the upgrades. It said this was upgraded with cement and a little bit of rebar. Clearly not enough, but still, this was a late 19th century fort with pre-World War I upgrade. What are you going to do when the German World War II war machine shows up? You were just not equipped for that. Did a good accounting of itself, but come on. So, I would imagine this would have to have been a rear defense for the powder magazine. That's just had a heavy heavy door. I think the break is I'll stop thinking, I don't know. So we should be coming out on the artillery positions if anything should make sense here. Here we are, outside on the artillery positions. Again, just saying, World War II, having a bunch of cannons sitting up here in the open just seems unhealthy. Earth defenses, artillery positions behind here, and the Germans will come from over here. This is the city it was set to protect, with the river between us and the city. And this is the first identifiable shell crater we've seen. True. This really is an interesting layout. It really has an old school dirt fort castle feel over it. Hole. Alright, what's this? Oh, this is damage. I'm not seeing anything spiky there. Okay. We're here again. The artillery positions, and here, well, the answers have really taken some damage there. Again, no steel rebar and reinforcement in this. I'm almost gonna say that the Polish soldiers fighting here, they were lucky, or really, really good at what they did, because, well, quite frankly, it could have gone a lot worse for World War II. But this looks like, I don't know if it looks like a direct hit, but certainly damage it is. So, I seem to see there's a door missing. There's a door missing. What a layout. And up here, first of the cement observation positions, and that looks a little bit like what I have seen outside Warsaw. It's a small artillery observation position built by the Polish, and there's a trench that runs all the way back here on top of it. Just look at the ditch down there. You have the ditch defense, an enormous dirt ditch, lots of infantry, obstacles, barbed wire, minefields, tank traps, all around this fort. The entrance here, it's a little low to the ground. It is a little low to the ground here, but I'll tell you, I've seen these before. One little observation peephole up there, leading to the front. You'll forgive me if I don't feel like hacking my way in there. And this is kind of what you'd be looking at up here. Artillery. Oh, observation port right there. Actually, that's fairly good. Fairly big. You can actually see something. And you're very low in profile. Also haven't taken any hits. I'm just so impressed with this ditch around this fort. And there, on the other side of the field, runs the river in front of the town. the first caserna we saw. It really is some impressive earthworks. They would absorb a lot of shells, certainly. But there's a lot of indications around here that there's more underneath where we are. But certainly this is some of the most impressive earthwork I've seen, and how undamaged this is given what it's been through. Further down in the ditch there's this thing that looks like it's crooked, to be honest. It also doesn't look like an entrance. It is certainly off its footing. It looks like an entire building that's fallen down. Yeah, will do. Okay. It could just be a shelter. Wow. This is well blown up. Get the mosquito away from me. I see you. Sometimes being clever. We're looking at some battle damage with a tree growing around it. Shocking, really. So there's a tunnel down here. Well, there was a tunnel down here. You all remember how I said this was amazing, how pristine this fort was, given the battle it must have been in. Well, this is kind of what I expected to find. Oh, there's a way to get in to the tunnel. Well, way to get in. Oh, there might actually be. But yes, this is the sort of damage I had expected to see from a World War I fort fighting World War II, with no rebar whatsoever. Can't actually exactly tell you what this was, but it looks like you can get in there. Oh, yeah, okay.
You're going there?
I'm just going to take a look. I would, if this is all there is, then with your shoes I would just say, hang on. Oh, yeah, I don't think you need this. There's nothing. No, hang on. No, this is it. This is as far as I can go.
Okay.
Yeah, this is the room I was just looking at from the other side. And I don't think there's any. There's nothing. There's just the front room, and the tunnel to the back is destroyed. This really cracked like an egg. Ditch defense. All right. This was the frontal, I'm thinking. And you look in here and all this, wow. There's actually a pipe sitting up there. This is just wreckage. Not held together by rebar. This would have been the tunnel entrance into somewhere else. It's just this. Now it's 2 floors. Imagine this whole floor, the whole roof is just sitting on this upside down pillar. there's a tunnel to the left somewhere into another compartment that I don't see how we can get to. Could be down through here, but that's cracked and blocked off too. But it's time to tell you, we've only just begun looking at this.
And after the Battle of Poland, the Germans and Russian forces divided Poland up between them, only then to begin fortifying their new frontier, with the Russians occupying and reinforcing some of the Polish old bunkers and constructing more into their Molotov line, in many places on top of or in between Polish bunkers. Just behind Novgorod, we see the first line of Russian defenses, and I will show you those next. They will see action in 1941, when the former Allies finally turn on each other. And since our buddy in East Prussia was so kind to just break down each room's function of these bunkers here, let me tell you a quick tour of it. The first room, Eastern room, was for machine gun. Second room, machine gun turret. Third, storage room. Fourth, engine room. Fifth, crew compartment. 6, Western machine gun room. 7, corridor. 8, airlock, locked with lightweight gas-proof doors. 9, machine gun port. 10, machine gun port for protection of the entrance and outfield. 11, gun port for protection of the outfield. 12, gun port to protect the machine gun and outfield. 13, flare launcher capable of launching grenades. 14, grenade stump. 15, technological channel for light communication. Awesome. 16, emergency exit. 17, air intake. 18, the entrance to the bunker. Behind me is Vanna von Braun's first test stand. Down the road is Deimler's nuclear reactor. Over there is the Maginot Line and all its amazing forts. I'm visiting them all and I'm bringing them to you. So I really appreciate you like, follow, and share what I'm doing, trying to document all these important historical locations. And if you feel like you want to watch more pictures or documents that I use for these, go to lostbattlefields.com. And if you feel like helping me out with my travels, because gasoline and travel and airfare is expensive, my PayPal is there, protectionserviceint.com. You are more than welcome, but you don't have to. I appreciate all your support and all your help, and I love seeing these locations, and I love bringing them to you.